I still remember the sound of their laughter as the truck pulled away its tires, spitting dust into the hot air, while I stood frozen on the cracked pavement of a lonely gas station. My husband Kyle leaned half out the window, grinning like a boy who had just pulled off the prank of his life. His brothers Brad and Chase howled with laughter in the back, their phones out recording every second as if humiliating me was entertainment. I yelled his name, my voice breaking, my feet stumbling forward. "Kyle?" I cried, waving my arms like a fool, but the more desperate I became, the louder they laughed. The gas station wasn't even a real stop, just one rusty pump, a dirty bathroom, and a vending machine humming in the corner. I had gone inside for one stupid reason: to grab Kyle an energy drink because he said he was too tired to go in himself. I thought I was being a good wife, caring for him the way I always did. Instead, when I stepped back outside, I found nothing but a fading trail of laughter and dust. At first I thought it was just a joke. 5 minutes passed, then 20, then an hour. I sat down on the curb under the blazing sun, my mouth dry, my hands trembling. Every few minutes I stood scanning the road, expecting the truck to return, expecting to hear the familiar rumble and see Kyle's face softened by guilt. But nothing came. My phone buzzed once before dying completely, a single cruel message flashing across the screen. "Don't be mad, babe. Just a prank. We'll come back in a bit." I didn't laugh. I didn't even cry. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out the last of my dignity. This wasn't just a joke. This was my marriage. This was the man I cooked for, defended, bent myself backwards to please, and he thought leaving me stranded miles from home was funny. The clerk behind the counter shrugged when I asked for help, muttering, "They'll be back, I guess." But I knew in my gut they wouldn't. Not soon. Not in the way I needed. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't want them to. I had spent 5 years twisting myself into knots for that family, biting my tongue. When Kyle's parents mocked me, pretending not to hear Brad's cutting jokes, swallowing every ounce of humiliation, when Chase played one of his cruel pranks. I had tried to be the easygoing wife, the one who could laugh along. But every laugh cut me deeper, until I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. That day at the gas station, sitting in the heat with nothing but a half-warm bottle of water, I made a decision I didn't even know I was capable of. When a minivan pulled up and a woman with tired eyes and 2 kids in the back seat looked at me, I asked quietly if she was heading north. She hesitated, then nodded. "I can take you as far as I'm going," she said. I climbed in with nothing but the clothes on my back and the weight of 5 wasted years. I didn't cry in that van. I stared out the window at the endless road, my heart pounding with something new, something like fear but also like freedom. When she dropped me off at a small bus station in a town I'd never heard of, I used the last ounce of battery on my phone to send a single message to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Aunt May. Can I come stay with you for a while? I don't know where else to go." Her reply came almost instantly. "Always come home." That night, I bought a one-way ticket. The bus rattled down the highway, carrying me farther and farther away from Kyle's laughter, from Brad and Chase's cruel smirks, from the version of myself I had become. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and whispered silently to no one, "I'm not going back. Not ever." Looking back, I realized that moment wasn't sudden. It was the breaking point of years of tiny cuts of humiliations disguised as jokes of love, twisted into control. Kyle never really loved me. He loved how I made him feel admired, respected, superior. He loved having me to show off when it suited him and to tear down when it didn't. And I let it happen because I thought love meant sacrifice. But the truth is, love doesn't laugh while you beg on the side of a road. Love doesn't strand you in the middle of nowhere and call it a prank. That day, I finally understood the difference between being loved and being used. And for the first time in years, I chose myself. The first weeks at Aunt May's house felt like stepping into a life I had only ever glimpsed through windows. Her small cottage smelled of lavender and old books, her kitchen cluttered with mugs and handwritten recipes, her arms always ready to wrap around me when the nightmares came. She never asked for details, not at first. She only said, "You're safe here, darling. Rest. Heal." And for the first time in years, I believed her. But healing didn't come easily. Nights were the worst. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing echoes of Kyle's laughter in my head, seeing the truck disappearing down the dusty road over and over. I'd curl into myself, clutching the quilt Aunt May had sewn, and wonder how I had let it get this far. How had I confused cruelty for love? During the day, I tried to help around the house. I planted flowers with her in the garden, chopped vegetables for soup, even fixed a squeaky hinge on the gate. Each small task grounded me, reminded me that I was capable of building, not just surviving. Aunt May encouraged me to take a part-time job at the local bookstore, a quaint little shop run by a retired teacher. The first time I held a paycheck in my hands that wasn't tied to Kyle or his family, I cried quietly in the stockroom. Independence had never felt so powerful. Still, there were scars that no amount of work could hide. Sometimes I'd catch myself flinching when a man laughed too loudly in the store or when a car engine revved outside. Sometimes I'd hear Brad sneer or Chase's cruel jokes echoing like ghosts. The humiliation I endured had soaked so deep into my bones that it felt like it would never leave. But one evening, sitting at Aunt May's kitchen table, she poured me a cup of tea and said, "You can't heal by pretending it never happened. You have to face it, or it will own you forever." Her words lit something in me. I realized that I had left Kyle physically, but part of me was still stranded at that gas station, waiting to be picked up, waiting for someone to decide if I mattered. I needed to reclaim that piece of myself. I started writing. At first, just scribbles in a notebook, memories of the gas station, of Kyle's cold smirk, of the years of jokes that chipped away at me. But soon the words poured faster than I could contain them. I wrote about the loneliness of being laughed at by the man I loved, about the shame of being treated like entertainment instead of a partner, about the moment on that bus when I whispered, "I'm not going back." Writing gave me back my voice, a voice I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Months passed. My hair grew longer. My laugh returned in fragments. My steps felt lighter. I built friendships at the bookstore, found comfort in Aunt May's steady presence, and began to imagine a future that wasn't defined by Kyle or his brothers. Yet no matter how far I came, there was a part of me that longed for closure. Then one autumn morning, as the leaves burned orange and gold outside, Aunt May handed me an envelope. "This came for you," she said, her eyes careful. Inside was a wedding invitation. Kyle's cousin was getting married in town, and somehow my name had found its way onto the guest list. I stared at the glossy card, my stomach twisting. My first instinct was to tear it up, to bury it deep in the trash. But another part of me whispered, "Maybe this is your chance." For days I wrestled with it. Why should I go? Why should I walk into the lion's den of the very people who had delighted in tearing me apart? But then I thought of that girl at the gas station, stranded and humiliated, and I realized she deserved to be seen. She deserved to stand tall, not as their victim, but as the woman who had survived. So I bought a simple dress. I polished my shoes. And when the day came, I walked into that church with Aunt May by my side, my head high and my heart pounding. The church buzzed with chatter and perfume, the air thick with the kind of shallow cheer I used to drown in whenever I was around Kyle's family. Faces turned as I stepped inside, whispers trailing me like shadows. I caught fragments: "My name, gas station, runaway wife." Let them whisper. I wasn't here to hide anymore. Kyle saw me first. He froze mid-conversation, the color draining from his face as though he'd seen a ghost. And maybe he had. To him, I was supposed to have vanished, a discarded punchline he never expected to hear from again. But there I stood in a navy dress that hugged my new strength, not his old possession. His jaw worked silently, like he was chewing on excuses that wouldn't come. His brothers weren't far behind. Brad smirked at first, nudging Chase, but when I didn't shrink back, their laughter died on their lips. They looked smaller than I remembered, like bullies caught out in the daylight. I kept walking, my heels clicking on the polished floor, each step echoing louder than their laughter ever had. Aunt May's presence beside me was steady, but I barely needed it. Every eye in that church could have been on me, and still I walked taller than I ever had before. The ceremony began, and I slipped into a pew near the middle, refusing to retreat to the shadows. Kyle's fiancée, a woman I didn't know, glanced nervously between us, sensing the tension but not understanding its roots. I felt a pang of pity for her. Did she know who he really was? Did she know the cruelty he disguised as humor, the emptiness beneath his charm? When the vows began, I almost laughed at the irony. Words about honor, respect, love, none of which Kyle had ever given me. My chest tightened, but not from pain, from vindication. I had survived him, and now I was free. It was during the reception that the real confrontation came. Kyle approached me by the buffet table, his hand twitching like he didn't know whether to reach for me or keep his distance. Maya, he started, his voice low, urgent. You shouldn't be here. I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. That's where you're wrong, Kyle. I should have been here all along. Not for you, but for me. To remind you that I exist, that I survived what you did. His face twisted. It was a joke, he muttered, the same pathetic defense he had used that day at the gas station. You always took things too seriously. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear. Leaving your wife stranded miles from home isn't a joke. Recording her humiliation isn't funny, it's cruelty. And the fact that you still can't see the difference is why you've lost me forever. His eyes darted around, checking if anyone was watching, but I didn't care. I straightened, letting my voice rise just enough for those nearby to hear. You want to know what's funny, Kyle? You thought leaving me at a gas station would break me, but it made me stronger than you'll ever be. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the clink of glasses and the shuffle of feet as people pretended not to stare. Kyle's fiancée looked at him with wide, searching eyes, doubt blooming on her face. His brothers shifted uncomfortably, their bravado crumbling. And Kyle. Kyle looked at me like he finally realized the truth. The girl he had left behind was gone. In her place stood a woman he couldn't control, couldn't diminish, couldn't erase. I turned away before he could respond, walking toward the exit with Aunt May. The weight that had clung to me for years lifted with every step, leaving only the lightness of freedom. Outside, the crisp evening air filled my lungs, and I laughed. Not bitter, not broken, but alive. Aunt May squeezed my hand. Proud of you, she whispered. So was I. The cool night wrapped around me like a balm, the hum of music and voices fading as the church doors closed behind us. I stood on the steps for a moment, staring at the stars pricking through the dark sky, and realized I wasn't trembling anymore. The fear, the shame, the weight of being laughed at it was gone. In its place was a steady calm, the kind that comes only when you finally reclaim yourself. Kyle didn't follow me out. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe the look on his fiancée's face was enough to pin him in place, to force him to face questions he'd spent years dodging. I didn't need to know. His story was no longer mine to carry. Aunt May tucked her arm into mine, and together we walked toward her car. How do you feel? She asked softly. I paused, searching for the right word. Free, I whispered. And then with a shaky laugh, lighter than I've ever felt, she smiled knowingly. That's what happens when you stop living in their shadows. The drive home was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that soothed rather than suffocated. The kind that let me breathe. I thought about the girl I had been at that gas station, abandoned, humiliated, waiting for a truck that never came back. For years I had hated her weakness, her silence. But now I realized she hadn't been weak at all. She had survived. She had found the strength to walk away, to start over, to rebuild. Without her, I wouldn't be here. Back at the cottage, I slipped out of my dress, folded it carefully, and set it aside. In the mirror, I studied my reflection, not just the lines of my face, or the way my eyes looked steadier now, but the woman staring back at me. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't a punchline or a victim. She was someone who had walked through humiliation and come out stronger on the other side. I crawled into bed, the quilt warm around me, and let out a deep breath. For the first time in years, I didn't dread tomorrow. Tomorrow was mine to shape. And to you listening to my story, maybe you felt stranded too. Maybe someone you trusted laughed at your pain, made you feel small, invisible, unworthy. I want you to know that you are not defined by the cruelty of others. You are defined by the way you rise, by the strength you find in your darkest moments, by the decision to keep moving forward, even when it hurts. I was left at a gas station like a joke. But that moment, as humiliating as it was, became the turning point of my life, because it forced me to choose myself. And choosing yourself, that is the most powerful revenge of all. Thank you for being here with me, for hearing my story. If it touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe for more, and leave a comment below. I'd love to know your story too.